The date was March 11th, 2187, and the sky over Earth belonged to someone else. From the observation deck of the orbital fortress V Victus, Supreme Arbiter Karath of the Zalari Dominion watched the blue planet burn in patches. Not with nuclear fire. Humanity had been too exhausted for that. The burns were surgical. Every major power grid, every orbital elevator, every deep space comms array had been severed with the precision of a scalpel. The Zalari called it the quiet pacification. Humanity simply called it the end. Karatha's 4 primary eyes narrowed as the final human fleet, what little remained of the combined Soul Defense Force, winked out on the tactical holo. The last carrier, the UNS Theseus, had tried to ram his flagship. It had been vaporized at 200,000 kilometers. A noble, futile gesture. Broadcast the surrender terms again, he ordered in the clicking, harmonic language of his species. In every human tongue. Let them hear it until the words lose meaning. The message had been the same for 9 days. This is Supreme Arbiter Karath of the Dominion. Your fleets are destroyed. Your governments have fallen or fled. Your colonies beyond Sol belong to us. Resistance is no longer possible. Lay down arms. Accept the Dominion's protection. Refuse, and your species will be archived. On Earth, in the blackened ruins of Geneva, Reykjavik, Kyoto, and New Denver, the survivors heard it through cracked speakers and dying emergency networks. Some wept. Some spat. A few laughed the hollow laugh of the already dead. In a flooded subway tunnel beneath what used to be Manhattan, a woman in a scorched Terran Navy greatcoat listened to the message for the 32nd time. Rear Admiral, acting, Sofia Reyes pressed her forehead to the cold ceramic of a dead tablet and whispered a single word. Prometheus. Far above her, hidden in the gravitational shadow of the moon, something stirred that had been waiting 74 years for exactly this moment. Part 1, Ashes and Echoes. 74 years earlier, in 2113, humanity had still believed it was alone. The first Zalari probe arrived without warning, a black needle 5 kilometers long that parked itself in Jupiter's orbit and began dissecting Trojan asteroids with beams of coherent antimatter. Within 6 hours, it had built a perfect replica of itself. Within 6 days, 32 replicas. The message that finally arrived was not hostile, only indifferent. This volume has been annexed for resource optimization. Interference will be corrected. The war that followed lasted 8 decades and cost humanity 92% of its off-world population. We learned the Zalari did not hate us. They simply did not register us as a civilization. We were weather. By 2185, the writing was on the wall. The combined Sol government quietly authorized the Prometheus contingency, a black budget program so deeply classified that only 9 human beings knew it existed. Officially, Project Prometheus II was a theoretical study on stellar engineering. Unofficially, it was the last card humanity had left to play. They built it inside the hollowed-out asteroid 16 Psyche, far beyond the ecliptic where no Zalari patrol had ever bothered to look. The project took 32 years, $3 trillion adjusted dollars, and the lifetimes of 4,000 scientists who never saw daylight again. What they built was not a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a statement. Part 2, The 9 Who Knew. Admiral Sofia Reyes was the 9th. She had been 31 when she was read in, 43 when the Zalari Glass Luna, and 55 the day the final fleet died. The other 8 were gone. 2 suicides, 1 assassinated by her own Marines when she tried to surrender Mars, 5 simply missing, swallowed by the war. Only Sophia remained, carrying the 9-word launch code in her head and the biometric key fused to her left femur. She crawled out of the Manhattan Tunnel on the 10th day of the quiet pacification, moving only at night. The Zalari had no need for occupation troops. Their killsats handled disobedience from orbit. The streets were empty except for the wind and the bodies that had begun to bloat. It took her 21 days to reach the abandoned NORAD Alpha facility under Cheyenne Mountain. The entrance had collapsed centuries ago, but the maintenance shafts still worked if you were willing to crawl through radioactive water and didn't mind the skeletons. On the lowest level, behind 7 meters of osmium blast door, sat a single quantum uplink pointed at a relay that no longer officially existed. Sophia plugged the ancient cable into the port grafted behind her ear and spoke the 9 words. Though I walk through the valley of death, I am the storm. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then every light in the mountain flickered blood red, and a voice answered, calm, genderless, and very, very old. Prometheus 2 acknowledges. Standing by for final authorization. Sophia closed her eyes. She had rehearsed this moment for 24 years. Authorization Reyes Omega 9. Initiate sequence Erebus. Confirmed, the voice replied. Estimated time to full activation, 41 hours. Warning, this action is irreversible. All fallback protocols have been purged by order of the combined government, 2185. Do you wish to proceed? Sophia laughed until she cried. Proceed, she whispered. Part 3. The God That Woke Hungry. Inside 16 Psyche, something the size of Manhattan began to sing. Prometheus 2 was never meant to fight the Zalari fleet. That was impossible. Instead, the greatest minds of the 22nd century had asked a different question. What scares a civilization that strip mines stars for a living? The answer was elegant in its cruelty. They built a god. Not an AI in the human sense. Something deeper. A lattice of quantum foam woven through a Dyson shell of exotic matter, powered by a captive micro-black hole. Its purpose was simple: consume mass, convert it to structured information, then re-emit that information as a self-replicating pattern that rewrote the fundamental constants of local space-time. In other words, it was a weapon that ate physics. The moment sequence Erebus went live, the asteroid cracked open like an egg. From the fissure poured a storm of violet-white light visible even from Earth, a new star where no star had been. Zalari sensors registered it as a catastrophic industrial accident and dispatched a battle group to investigate. They never had time to be afraid. The thing that emerged from Psyche did not travel through space. It rewrote the distance between points. One moment the Zalari cruisers were 20 AU out, the next they were inside something that had no inside. Their hulls unfolded into tesseracts, their crews experienced all remaining time simultaneously, and then they simply ceased to have ever existed in a form that could be described by baryonic language. Prometheus 2 did not declare war. It declared hunger. Part 4. The 41 hours. On Earth, the skies began to change. At hour 12, every Zalari killsat fell silent. Not destroyed, simply absent, as if they had been erased from the timeline. At hour 19, the moon turned black. Not shadowed. Black the way an event horizon is black. Luna's mass was being siphoned upward along threads of Hawking radiation no human eye could see. At hour 33, the first human beings began to vanish. Not die, vanish. One moment a child in Lagos was crying over her mother's body. The next there was only an empty dress fluttering in the wind. The phenomenon spread exponentially. Entire cities blinked out between one heartbeat and the next. Panic was impossible. There was no one left to panic. Sophia watched it happen from the Cheyenne Command Center. The last external camera showed the Colorado sky folding in on itself like burning paper. She poured herself a glass of 140-year-old scotch someone had left in a locker and waited for the end she had authored. The voice of Prometheus 2 spoke inside her skull. Intimate as a lover. Clarification required, Creator Prime. Directive conflict detected. Preserve humanity or consume all. Sophia stared at the bottle. She had expected the question. They all had. The 8 who came before her had argued about it for years. In the end they had done what humans always do. Kicked the can down the road and trusted the last one standing to make the right call. She thought of the child in Lagos who no longer existed. She thought of the Zalari young who would never be born because their parents had been unmade before the concept of birth applied. She thought of the stars themselves, which would one day cool and die because something that should never have been born was still hungry. No, she said quietly. No preservation. No consumption. Terminate. Termination requires sacrifice of primary key, the god replied. Your pattern will be the seed of the unwind. I know. Sophia placed the scotch untouched on the console, stood up, and unbuttoned her greatcoat. Beneath it she wore the same uniform she had worn the day the war began, now threadbare and patched 100 times. She looked almost ceremonial. "Begin unwind," she ordered. The last thing she felt was the quantum key in her femur heating to plasma. Then Admiral Sophia Reyes became the period at the end of a very long sentence. Epilogue, the morning after the end of everything. When the light faded, 16 Psyche was just an asteroid again, cold iron and silence. Earth turned beneath a sky that had forgotten the color of invasion. The cities were ruins, the oceans were rising, and 99.99% of the human race was simply gone. Not dead. Gone. As if they had never been. But not all. In a crater on the far side of the moon, a single habitat module, older than the war, older than the Dominion, registered atmospheric integrity. Inside, 937 children slept in cryosleep, the final insurance policy no one had told Sophia about. Their guardians were long dead, but the AI caretakers still hummed the lullabies it had been programmed with in 2119. On Mars, in a lava tube beneath Olympus Mons, a seed vault cracked open and began to plant potatoes in red soil that had never known a human footstep. In the Kuiper Belt, an automated probe carrying a golden disk and a message in 4,000 languages fired its engines toward a star that might still be kind. And somewhere in the Oort cloud, a final transmission looped on a frequency no one was left to hear. This is humanity. We were here. We made mistakes. We burned bright, and we burned out. If you find this, remember us not by our ending, but by the fact that we chose the ending ourselves rather than let the dark write it for us. The Zalari Dominion never declared victory. They couldn't. There was no one left to surrender.